The champagne flute in my hand was Waterford crystal, icy against my fingertips, but the sentence my husband had just delivered cut deeper than broken glass. Sarah. Oh God, no, Joseph laughed, clapping Paul on the back, the sound bouncing off the exposed steel beams of the construction site where the gala was being held. Sarah couldn't survive the pressure of this industry. She's got her cute little interior decorating hobby, keeps her busy enough. The men around him, Paul, George, Sean, laughed into their drinks. The board of directors of Vanguard Development, the men who supposedly ruled this empire, and Joseph, my husband, stood among them as their crown jewel, senior project director. The man about to break ground on the Apex Tower, the tallest building on the West Coast. He didn't look at me when he said it. He never did anymore. He motioned vaguely in my direction with his glass, as if I were an accent chair chosen to complement the drapes. Honestly, boys, it's better this way, he continued. I build the skyline. She picks throw pillows, everyone stays in their lane. Jard smirked, swirling his scotch. Must be nice, Joe. A wife who doesn't ask questions about the budget. Joseph scoffed, draining his glass. She doesn't even know what a budget is. I give her an allowance for fabrics, and she stays out of the real work. Perfect system. I stood there in my navy silk dress, wind whipping my hair across my face, watching the man I married 7 years ago turn my dignity into party entertainment. He looked powerful in his custom Italian suit beneath the floodlights, surrounded by the city's elite. He looked like a king, but kings often forget who laid the stones. I didn't flinch, I didn't cry. I didn't toss my champagne in his face, though the urge pulsed in my chest like a bruise. Instead, I took a slow sip. The champagne tasted metallic like victory. Joseph had made a fatal miscalculation. He mistook my silence for weakness. He assumed my lack of a title meant a lack of authority. He had no idea that the allowance he joked about came from my personal accounts. No idea that the blueprints, the permits, the structural breakthroughs for the Apex Tower had all been signed off by a shadow CEO he'd never met, a CEO named Sarah. I watched him refill his glass, laughter booming, arrogance leaking into the space like gas. Tonight, he was celebrating his promotion to partner. He believed this gala was his coronation. He was wrong. Tonight was his execution. Enjoy the evening, gentlemen, I said softly, my voice slicing cleanly through their laughter. Joseph barely glanced at me. Yeah, babe. Go find the buffet or something. The adults are talking. I smiled. It was the kind of smile that should have frightened him, the kind a structural engineer wears before triggering a controlled demolition. But he was too intoxicated by his own ego to notice the charges already planted. Of course, Joseph, I murmured. I'll leave you to it. I turned and walked away, heels striking concrete in a steady, deliberate rhythm. I bypassed the buffet, past the catering tents. Moved beyond the string quartet and the glittering investors who had no idea I signed their dividend checks. I slipped into the shadows of the unfinished lobby and stopped. Pulled my phone from my clutch, opened a secure app only one person on Earth could access. My thumb hovered, no hesitation, no tremor, just the clean certainty of an equation finally balancing. I typed 3 words, initiate protocol Obsidian, then I hit send. My screen pulsed once. Protocol Obsidian, active. It wasn't a panic button, it was a digital guillotine. I slipped the phone away and inhaled deeply, the cold night air filling my lungs. Behind me, the gala swelled with life. Vivaldi floated through the steel skeleton. Champagne flowed freely. My husband was likely accepting congratulations for a project he didn't own, paid for by a bonus he would never see. I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt the calm focus of a surgeon scrubbing in. Protocol Obsidian was a failsafe I'd designed 5 years earlier. When I made Joseph the public face of Vanguard Development, I understood the risks. Power is addictive. Joseph had an addictive personality, so I built backdoors into every system he touched, a master key only I possessed, and now, inside Vanguard's cloud servers, that key turned. Automated scripts cascaded into motion. Within 30 seconds, Joseph's biometric clearance was revoked. His corporate credit cards, the ones funding Italian suits and I suspected gifts for junior architect Alyssa, were frozen. His email access vanished. The most satisfying part was the asset freeze. I walked toward the valet stand, heels tapping against pavement. I didn't need to look back. I knew exactly what was happening. At that moment, Joseph's phone would be vibrating in his pocket. Transaction declined. Login error. Access denied. He'd ignore it at first. Blame reception. Curse it. he wouldn't yet realize he'd become a ghost in his own life. Miss Sarah, the valet said, opening the door of my modest sedan. Another prop, the interior decorator's car. Joseph drove a company-leased Aston Martin. I drove a Honda because it fit the narrative of the supportive, less successful wife. Thank you, Thomas, I said, sliding behind the wheel. I glanced in the side mirror. Through the glass walls of the unfinished lobby, I saw Joseph staring at his phone, frowning. He tapped it hard, shook it, as if force could override a systemic lockout. Annoyed, not afraid, not yet. He had no idea the allowance he mocked, the money I supposedly spent on pillows and fabric samples, was a dividend payout from my personal trust. A trust that controlled 51% of Vanguard's voting stock. He had no idea the real work he bragged about was mere project management. The designs, the engineering innovations, the city permits, all secured by me, under a pseudonym, S.V. Sterling, the ghost architect, the name on every blueprint he'd ever presented. He assumed it belonged to a reclusive old man in Zurich. He never imagined it stood for Sarah Vanguard Sterling. I put the car in gear. I didn't go home. I couldn't return to the house that smelled like his cologne and my restraint. I drove toward the city, toward the real headquarters of Vanguard, the one Joseph didn't know existed. The gala was a facade, the steel beams were real, the man celebrating beneath them was a hologram, and I had just pulled the plug. As I merged onto the highway, my dashboard chimed. A text from Joseph, card isn't working, probably fraud, transfer 5,000 to the joint account, taking the guys out after this. I stared at it. Even as his world collapsed, his instinct was entitlement. I didn't respond, I deleted the thread. Tonight he would be humiliated when the bill arrived. Tomorrow he would be ruined. The dashboard clock read 11:42 p.m. As I pulled into the underground garage of the Sterling building, unassuming compared to the glass towers downtown, but it housed the true nerve center of my empire. I took the private elevator to the penthouse office. Lights flickered on automatically, illuminating walls lined with framed blueprints, not Joseph's, mine. I crossed to the drafting table in the corner, the same one my father had given me when I graduated top of my class at 22, overflowing with ideas that would reshape the skyline. Back then, I was Sarah Sterling, heir to a modest construction fortune and cursed with brilliance in a man's world. I remembered pitching the Skybridge complex to a room full of investors. They never looked at my designs, they looked at my legs, they asked about my father. One of them, Paul, the same Paul now drinking scotch with my husband, had patted my hand and said, "Sweetheart, let the men handle the steel, you worry about the drapes." That moment didn't break me. It radicalized me. I realized if my buildings were ever going to exist, I had to separate creation from creator. I needed a face, a man's face. Someone handsome, charismatic, ambitious enough to sell the vision, but not intelligent enough to question the engineering. Enter Joseph, a mid-level project manager when I met him, charming, hungry. Completely average, a CEO jawline with the strategic depth of a puddle. I courted him, married him, then I built him. I created Vanguard Development as a shell company owned by a blind trust. I appointed Joseph as the public face, the senior project director, and then I became the ghost. Every night for 7 years, I waited until Joseph fell asleep. Then I would slip out of bed, go to my home studio, which he thought was a craft room, and work until dawn. I designed the structural integrity of the Azure Towers. I calculated the wind load resistance for the Millennium Spire. I drafted the zoning permits, the budget allocations, the environmental impact reports. In the morning, I would leave the files on the kitchen counter with a note. "Honey, I found these notes from the consultants in Zurich. You should look them over." And Joseph, bless his arrogant heart, never questioned it. He assumed he was a genius who just attracted good luck. He took the files, presented them as his own, and based in the applause. I watched from the sidelines. I played the role of the supportive, slightly dim-witted wife. I nodded when he explained basic concepts to me. I accepted the allowance he gave me from the profits I generated. It was a trade-off, the architect's paradox. To see my creations rise, I had to let my name fall. I accepted the invisibility because I loved the work more than the glory. I told myself it was worth it to see the steel go up, to see the city change because of my mind, even if no one knew it. But Joseph had broken the contract. He had mistaken my sacrifice for incompetence. He had mistaken my silence for stupidity. And tonight he had tried to erase me completely. I walked over to the wall safe and pressed my thumb against the scanner. It beeped and popped open. Inside was a single leather-bound ledger. This was the poisoned gift. For the last 2 years, as Joseph's ego inflated, he had started getting greedy. He wanted to feel like a real boss, so he started requesting discretionary funds for site management. I knew what he was doing. He was skimming. He was moving money into offshore accounts, buying gifts for Alyssa, funding a lifestyle his salary couldn't support. Most wives would have stopped him. I didn't. I approved every single request. I signed off on the transfers as the anonymous owner. I let him take 50,000 here, 100,000 there. I let him build a paper trail of embezzlement so long and so detailed that it would take a forensic accountant 5 minutes to put him in prison for 20 years. I wasn't just his victim, I was his enabler. I handed him the shovel, pointed to the soft earth, and watched him dig his own grave. I ran my hand over the ledger. Tomorrow morning, I wouldn't just be divorcing a cheating husband. I would be prosecuting a felon. The phone on my desk buzzed. It was a secure line. Miss Sterling, a voice asked. It was Jard, one of the board members. He sounded terrified. We received the protocol Obsidian alert. The system says Joseph has been locked out. What is going on? I picked up the receiver. My voice was calm, authoritative, the voice Sarah Sterling used when she wasn't pretending to be a decorator. Good evening, Jard, I said. I think it's time we had a board meeting. 8 a.m. Don't be late, I hung up. The ghost was done haunting the machine. It was time to possess it. I sat in the silence of my penthouse office, the leather-bound ledger resting heavy on my lap. The numbers on the page were damning wire transfers to consulting firms that didn't exist, invoices for materials that were never delivered, but it wasn't the theft that made my blood run cold. It was the memory of what had happened just 1 hour ago, 20 minutes before I initiated the protocol. The public insult in front of the board hadn't been the trigger. It was just the debris from the explosion that had already happened on the balcony. I closed my eyes and let the memory wash over me. The gala 8:45 at night. I had stepped out onto the VIP terrace to escape the noise. The air smelled of expensive perfume and damp concrete. I was looking at the skeleton of the Apex Tower, feeling a swell of pride when the door banged open. It was Joseph. He was flushed, his eyes glassy with too much scotch and adrenaline. He spotted me and stumbled over, not with affection, but with the aggressive energy of a man who feels invincible. There you are, he slurred, slightly cornering me against the railing, hiding again. You always shrink when the lights get bright, Sarah. It's embarrassing. I'm just getting some air, Joseph, I said calmly. You seem to be enjoying yourself. He laughed, a harsh barking sound. Enjoying myself? I'm owning the room, Sarah. I'm the king of this city. Paul just told me the partnership is a lock. A lock. He leaned in close, his breath hot and boozy against my ear. And you know what that means? It means the bonus is clearing next week. $2 million net. That's a lot of money, I said, my voice neutral. It is, he sneered, enough to finally trim the fat. I looked at him. What does that mean? He gripped my upper arm, his fingers digging into the silk of my dress. It wasn't quite painful, but it was possessive, dominating. It means we're done, Sarah. You and me, the words hung in the humid air. I didn't blink. You're leaving me. Don't look so shocked. He scoffed. Look at us. I'm building empires. What are you doing? Picking out beige swatches for guest rooms. You're dead weight, Sarah. You're a nice little anchor, but I need to fly. He let go of my arm and leaned back against the railing, looking up at the tower I had designed. Alyssa gets it, he said, saying the name I had suspected for months. Alyssa, the 24-year-old junior architect. She has vision, she has fire, she's not a cute little hobbyist like you. He turned back to me, a cruel grin twisting his face. So enjoy the party, babe, because once that check clears on Monday, you're going back to your parents' house and I'm moving into the penthouse. He patted my cheek, a patronizing, dismissive tap. Don't worry, I'll write you a check. I'm generous. Present time, the penthouse office. I opened my eyes. The office was quiet, save for the hum of the server banks in the next room. He thought he was discarding me. He thought the $2 million bonus was his escape hatch. He didn't know that the bonus was actually a trap I had baited. I had personally approved the allocation of those funds into a holding account that was flagged by the SEC for money laundering, an account he had set up. He wasn't waiting for a payout. He was waiting for an indictment. I looked down at the ledger one last time. He wanted to trim the fat. He wanted to fly. I picked up my secure phone. A notification blinked on the screen. It was from the head of security at the gala. Subject is attempting to leave the premises. Card declined at valet. He is creating a disturbance. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp expression that reflected in the darkened window. Let him scream, I whispered to the empty room. I stood up and walked to the wall of windows overlooking the city. Somewhere down there in the glittering lights, Joseph was realizing that his credit cards were plastic scraps and his access badge was just a piece of plastic. He wanted a divorce. I would give him something much more permanent. I pressed the intercom button on my desk. Security, this is Sarah Sterling. Prepare the conference room and make sure the police have the side entrance clear. We're going to have a guest. The next morning, the sun hit Joseph's face like a physical assault. He groaned, shielding his eyes, the hangover from the gala, pounding a steady rhythm against his skull. He reached for his phone on the nightstand, squinting at the screen. Still no service. Account suspended, he cursed, tossing the device onto the duvet. Useless IT department, he muttered. I'm firing the whole team the second I sign the partnership papers. He wasn't worried. In Joseph's mind, the world didn't break. It just occasionally stuttered before bending back to his will. The declined cards, the locked phone, it was clearly a system-wide glitch. Probably a security update gone wrong, annoying but temporary. He dragged himself out of bed and into the shower. The hot water helped clear the fog of scotch and arrogance. By the time he was knotting his silk tie in the mirror, he had reconstructed his reality. The glitch was actually a good sign. He decided they were probably updating his clearance levels for the promotion, upgrading him to partner status. He checked his personal phone, a backup device he kept for private calls with Alyssa. There was a single text message from Jard, the board director. Boardroom 8 a.m. sharp. Joseph smiled at his reflection. This was it, the coronation. Sorry, Sarah, he said to the empty room, adjusting his cufflinks. Looks like you're getting left behind a little sooner than planned. He drove to the Vanguard headquarters, bypassing the employee garage and parking the Aston Martin directly in the CEO's reserved spot. It was a power move, a statement. He strode into the lobby, expecting the usual flurry of greetings. Good morning, Mr. Harper. Right this way, sir. Instead, the lobby was eerily quiet. The receptionist, a young woman he usually winked at, refused to meet his eyes. She was typing furiously, her shoulders hunched. The security guard, a burly man named Mike, watched him with an expression that wasn't respect. It looked like pity. Morning, Mike Joseph called out, breezy and confident. Keep the riff-raff out today. Big meetings, Mike didn't answer. He just tapped his earpiece and murmured something into his collar. Joseph ignored him. He stepped into the private elevator and pressed the button for the penthouse floor. He hummed to himself as the numbers climbed. He pictured the scene waiting for him. Champagne on ice contracts on the table, the boys clapping him on the back to the new king of the skyline. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. The hallway was silent. The glass walls of the conference room were frosted, opaque, hiding the interior. Joseph fixed his jacket, flashed his winning smile, and pushed the double doors open. All right, gentlemen, he boomed, striding in. Let's get this. The words died in his throat. There was no champagne, there were no smiles. Paul, Jard, and Sean sat along the sides of the massive mahogany table. They looked pale like men who had just witnessed a natural disaster. Jard was wiping sweat from his forehead. Sean was staring at his hands, and at the head of the table in the chair of the board, the seat that had remained empty for 7 years because the owner was in Zurich, sat a woman. She wasn't wearing the beige cardigans or floral dresses Joseph hated. She was wearing a charcoal suit sharp as a knife's edge. Her hair was pulled back, severe and commanding. She was reading a file, her pen hovering over the page. She didn't look up as he entered. Joseph blinked. His brain stuttered, trying to process the image. It was like seeing a dog walking on its hind legs or the sun rising in the west. It was impossible. Sarah, he laughed, a nervous, confused sound that echoed too loudly in the quiet room. Babes, what are you doing here? Did you bring me coffee? You can't be in here, honey. This is the boardroom. The woman at the head of the table finally looked up. Her eyes were cold, dark, and utterly unfamiliar. Sit down, Joseph, she said. It wasn't a request. Joseph froze his smile, faltering into a riches of confusion. He looked at Paul, Jard, Sean. They didn't meet his eyes. They were staring at their laps, looking like schoolboys caught cheating on a test. Sarah, seriously, Joseph chuckled, though the sound was thin, strained. This is cute, but we have actual business to discuss. The partnership papers. Did you redecorate the room or something? Is that why you're sitting there? I closed the file I was reading. It made a sharp thwack sound that echoed in the silence. There are no partnership papers, Joseph, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it filled the room. And I'm sitting here because I own the chair and the table and the building and the company. Joseph blinked rapidly. What you own Vanguard? That's impossible. Vanguard is owned by a Swiss trust. SV Sterling, I repeated, Sarah Vanguard Sterling. I watched the realization hit him. It was slow at first, like a crack spreading across a windshield. He looked at the blueprints on the wall, the same blueprints he had claimed were his. He looked at the men around him, the men who had known the truth for the last hour and were now terrified of the woman who signed their paychecks. No, he whispered. No, you're just a decorator. You pick out throw pillows. I pick out everything, Joseph, I said, leaning forward. I picked out the site for the Apex Tower. I picked out the structural steel grade. And 7 years ago, I picked out a face for my company because I knew the industry wouldn't respect a 24-year-old woman. I stood up. I built you, Joseph. I gave you the scripts, the plans, the credit. I made you a king because I needed a figurehead. But figureheads are replaceable. Joseph's face turned a mottled red. You lied to me for 7 years. You played me. I protected my investment. I corrected him coldly. And frankly, you were a decent investment until you started stealing from me. I pressed a button on the remote. The wall screen behind me lit up. It wasn't a PowerPoint presentation. It was a forensic accounting report. Joseph stared at the screen. Rows of numbers, dates, and wire transfers. Transfers to Consulting Group Alpha, transfers to J Site Services, transfers that match the down payments on a condo in the Marina District, a condo listed under the name Alisa, $500,000. I said embezzled over 24 months. Joseph let out a strangled laugh. You can't prove that I approved those expenses. As senior project director, I have discretion. You have discretion, I interrupted. Because I gave it to you, this was the moment, the twist of the knife. Did you really think the accounting department just missed $500,000? I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. Did you think you were that clever? I walked around the table, approaching him. He backed away slightly, hitting the edge of the mahogany table. I approved every single one of those transfers personally. Joseph, every time you requested site management funds, the request came to my private server and I clicked approve. His eyes widened. What? I knew what you were doing 2 years ago. I said I knew about the money. I knew about Alisa. I could have fired you then, but firing you for incompetence is just a severance package. Firing you for grand larceny? That's a prison sentence. I stopped right in front of him. I was close enough to smell the stale alcohol on his breath, the fear radiating off him in waves. I didn't just catch you, Joseph. I fed you. I gave you enough rope to hang yourself, and you tied the noose with both hands. Joseph looked at the screen, then back at me. He looked at the boys' club board members, realizing they weren't his friends. They were witnesses. Sarah, he stammered, his voice cracking. Sarah, wait, we can fix this. I can pay it back. The bonus, I said, a cruel smile touching my lips. The bonus you were going to use to leave me. The bonus you were going to use to start a new life with the girl whose work you're stealing. I shook my head. There is no bonus, Joseph. That money is currently in an escrow account managed by the district attorney's office. Along with this ledger, I tossed the leather-bound book onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of him. You wanted to trim the fat. I asked, echoing his words from the balcony. You wanted to fly. I pointed to the door, start flapping. Joseph tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat like broken glass. His face was a mask of sheer panic, the arrogant mask shattering into 1,000 pieces. Sarah, please, he croaked, his voice thin and desperate. We're married. You can't send me to prison. Think about us, think about the life we built, the life I built. I corrected him, my voice devoid of emotion. You were just a tenant, Joseph. And you missed rent, he stumbled back, his legs hitting a chair. I can fix this. I know she meant nothing, I said calmly, because you're incapable of caring about anyone but yourself. And that is why you're failing right now. Not because you got caught, but because your brain cannot process a reality where I am more powerful than you. I walked closer, my voice dropping to a clinical, almost academic tone. This was the narcissistic collapse. I had read about it, studied it, but seeing it in real time was fascinating. His grandiose self-image was colliding with the undeniable fact of his inferiority, and his psyche was short-circuiting. You're freezing up, Joseph, I whispered. You can't breathe, you can't think. Because for 7 years you built your entire ego on the lie that you were the genius and I was the accessory. And now that the lie is gone, you realize there's nothing underneath. You're hollow. He sank into the chair, burying his face in his hands. A sob escaped him, a jagged, ugly sound. I felt nothing, no pity, no satisfaction, just the cold finality of a demolition order being signed. I turned to the board members. Paul jarred. Shaw, you enabled him. You laughed at his jokes about my incompetence. You drank his scotch and ignored the red flags because the money was good. They flinched as one. You're not fired, I said, watching hope flare in their eyes. Not yet, but from this moment on, you report directly to me. Every expense, every email, every breath you take goes through my office. If you step 1 inch out of line, you join Joseph in the cell block. Do we understand each other? Yes, Miss Sterling, Paul whispered, looking at the floor. Good, I pressed the intercom button. Security, you can come in now. The doors opened and 2 uniformed guards entered. They didn't look at Joseph with respect anymore. They looked at him like he was trash that needed to be taken out. Escort Mr. Harper off the premises, I ordered, and hand him over to the detectives waiting in the lobby. Joseph looked up, tears streaming down his face. Sarah, goodbye, Joseph, I said, turning my back on him. I heard the scuffle of feet, the low murmur of the guards, and then the heavy thud of the doors closing. The silence that followed was heavy but clean, like the air after a storm. I walked to the window. Down below, I saw a police cruiser waiting. I watched as they led Joseph out in handcuffs, his head bowed, his tailored suit looking like a costume he had outgrown. It was over. I left the boardroom and took the elevator down to the ground floor. I didn't stop at the lobby. I walked out the side exit towards the construction site of the Apex Tower. The morning sun was hitting the steel skeleton, turning it gold. The air smelled of wet concrete and promise. I put on a hard hat, not a pink one, not a visitor hat, but a white one with owner stankled on the front. I walked to the edge of the foundation pit where the concrete was still curing. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small cream-colored card. Sarah Harper, Interior Design Consultant. I looked at it one last time, the name of a woman who didn't exist, a woman who had made herself small so a small man could feel big. I dropped the card into the wet cement. It landed with a soft clip and was swallowed by the gray sludge. My name is Sarah Sterling, I said to the wind and the steel. I turned and walked back toward my building, my heels clicking a steady, powerful rhythm on the pavement. The ghost was gone, the architect had arrived. If you've ever had to build in silence while others took the credit, share this story. It's time to put your name on your own work.